What is it?
The main thing I got from it was like this sense of feeling seen and validated.
Well, why does it have to be this way?
This book was placed in my hand for this moment.
Insightful, learned a lot, wrote some quotes that I'm ready to like paint on my wall.
I love this book!
That we just kind of pull out some of the big themes that we see and talk about a few different ones.
I apologize if most of my contribution has K-pop references.
Alternative book title, The Feminine Mystique Part 2. You were really just gay all along. Welcome to Book Club.
With Julia.
And Victoria.
We are two lifelong friends who read a book and talk about it each episode.
This is a podcast where we explore new perspectives and we use books as tools for personal and community growth.
This week, we are reading Ace of Spades by Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé, a dark academia psychological thriller about the only two black students at a very old private school. The book is often described as Gossip Girl meets Get Out.
Big spoiler warning up top if you haven't read this book. We will be talking about all the things, including all the twists and turns and big reveals. So this is your warning. If you care about spoilers, go read the book and then come back. If you've come back now, you read the book, welcome back. We're still here. And we're super excited to talk about this book. But first, a few shameless plugs from Julia.
Yay! Thanks, Victoria. So, first thing, if you like our show and want to support us, you can rate, review, and subscribe on all the podcast platforms, whichever one strikes your fancy. Next thing, anytime you see a book linked in our show notes, if you click on that link, that will take you to our affiliate page on bookshop.org, where you can buy books from around North America, specifically from independent bookstores. If you use one of those links to buy any book through our affiliate page, we get a very, very small kickback that helps us buy more books. And then finally, if you'd like to become a member, you can go to buymeacoffee.com/bookclubwithjv and see all of our personal newsletters. I have an autism-related newsletter, a members-only film club thing where we review book to TV or book to film adaptations. We've got Pachinko on there right now. And then next episode, this is the 99th episode. So next episode is going to be our 100th episode, which is so wild. So we've got some fun stuff planned for that as well. Most likely a giveaway. We're going to be giving away fun, free stuff.
Because we like to give away things so people can read more books. It's great.
Exactly. That's always our goal.
So stay tuned for that. Man, 99 episodes.
Whew.
If you would have told me when we first started this, you're going to do this so often you get to 99 episodes, I would be shocked. Because we were just so dedicated to making it happen.
Mm-hmm.
We were we have to make a plan tonight. We need to schedule it now or this idea will never see the light of day.
Yeah.
Literally, we sat down one night and just made up the entire plan and then picked a recording date and picked a release date and we're starting it. Which maybe isn't the best way to start any project because there was a lot of things we learned as we went. But it's pretty cool. As I think we've said many times on this podcast, it's the most consistent project in either of our lives.
I feel like we needed momentum in order to have the motivation to learn all the new things that we've learned. I don't think we would have gotten to the level of quality and the type of production that we're happy with if we had just sat around and researched it for
right.
You know,
we would have paralyzed ourselves. We would have been we're not good enough, we can't do it, instead of what do you mean? Editing can't be hard. Spends so many hours learning how to do it.
Almost so many hours. So many hours.
But this feels like we're getting into episode 100 territory.
I know.
We should hold back and maybe do a little bit. We'll add a little reflection time into next week's episode. But before we get away too far down the line, we'll enjoy episode 99 while it's here. So, Ace of Spades. When Julie and I were putting together the list of books we were going to read for this season, we did something a little different, which was we picked a very specific genre.
Yeah.
And said, let's go read something in that genre, which was dark academia, which I don't think I've really read at all. I wasn't very familiar with it as a genre. I read things adjacent to it. I think of Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia, which has that, dark Gothic vibes.
And I've definitely watched things like it, but never in a book I think, for me.
So I think I literally just searched dark academia books.
You did.
And we read through a list and we're like, oh, Ace of Spades sounds really fascinating. Let's add that to the list. And then, okay, this book was published June 2021. It was published first in the States and then like a week later it came out in the UK. And it was really, like, it did really well, but I don't know what it was. Something about April 2022, I like couldn't find it in any US bookstores. Like I was traveling at the time, and so every time I stopped by a bookstore, it was usually local bookstores, I would just poke around and see if I could find it. And at first I was like, oh, maybe, maybe it was just like really big in the UK. It wasn't as big here. And then as I'm reading about it, I'm like, no, this was a huge bestseller. My now theory is that the bookstores didn't order as much as they thought they were going to need. And like it just sold out a ton of places. And I was trying to find it, like 10 months after it came out. So I ended up buying the ebook version, but I promptly then forgot to bring my Kindle with me when I visited Julia in Belgium. So I read this one on my phone, which usually is like the worst. I get distracted. I don't like how few words fit on the screen, whatever. But I enjoyed this book so much, it did not even faze me that I was reading on my phone.
Wow.
Like, I wasn't getting distracted and opening different apps. The one downside is that we were on a day trip, Julia and I together, and I forgot to bring my phone charger. And I depleted my phone battery so quickly reading on the train the entire way there that I didn't have enough juice to like read on the way back. And that was the saddest part of that day. But otherwise, my reading experience was very engrossing. I would like read the book for like large chunks of time. I like couldn't do anything with myself one day until I finished the book. I was just like, nothing is happening today until this book is done. I need to know. Because I was like, at that point in the plot where you just like can't set it down.
Yeah.
So I think I read it in less than like 3 days.
She was like, don't talk to me. I'm leaving. I'm having a morning and I'm reading this book. And then she returned when it was done. Because Victoria couldn't find it, originally I was planning on reading her copy, but then she got a digital copy, and so it was like, well, how do we share that? And we weren't sure if that was going to happen, and it was a whole mess. And then we were looking for a book for Victoria to read on the plane, and this book was just sitting there on a table among all the other, like, popular YA, famous on TikTok books. It was like, oh, there it was. And we were like, oh my God, well, now I have to buy a copy so that I can read it in paperback.
I feel like I didn't see it at so many stores, and then when we finally did, there was like 8 copies sitting there. Like, it wasn't just like one like squeezed in somewhere. It was like prominently on display, and I was like, am I blind? Did I not see it in like all the other stores I was at? But whatever. I'm glad you got it. I'm glad you got a copy. Julie even posted a picture of it, and I was like, just scrolling too quickly, and I was like, oh my gosh, one of my friends is reading Ace of Spades. I can't wait. I was like so ready to like comment and be like, oh, I love that book, like let's talk about it. And then I saw it was Julia, and I was like, oh, we already have plans to talk about it.
So then the time that I had dedicated to read it just got all messed up because so I waited until my finals were done. And then basically I had planned to read it last Wednesday. But then earlier that week, we made these last minute me and my friend made these last minute plans to to go on this kind of insane all-nighter trip to this town in the Netherlands to go see an English language showing of Everything Everywhere All at Once. It's like the only one happening in our whole region, and there was only one showing at 9 p.m. and we were like, okay, well, we have to go. But the way the transportation worked, we didn't get back till like 6 a.m. It was a whole mess. But we were like so determined to see this movie. So that didn't, we didn't plan that until like 24 hours before we left. Yeah, so Wednesday was originally supposed to be my reading day. That didn't happen. It was a very chaotic day. And then I got back and I was very tired. So then I read this book in 2 days, Thursday evening to like Friday evening. That was basically all I did for like 24 hours. And I loved it. It was gripping and so much fun, but also like absolutely devastating on so many levels. I love an edgy high school thriller, as long as they don't get too insane, which so Euphoria is like a little past my level, but I love like Elite. Elite is great. Seasons 1 through 3. But anyway, so I felt like this was an amazing addition to the genre, and I'm very happy with it. That was a very long and winding tale, but it was really good.
Yeah, we're like 10 minutes into the podcast and we're just like talking about like our very detailed personal lives when it comes to this book, but that's all about the experience reading.
Yeah.
So, about our author, Faridah Àbíké-Íyímídé is the instant New York Times international best-selling and award-winning author of Ace of Spades. The book was billed as Get Out meets Gossip Girl, as we've mentioned, and Entertainment Weekly has called it this summer's hottest YA debut. Faridah was born and raised in Croydon, South London, and moved to the Scottish Highlands for her undergraduate degree, where she completed a Bachelor's of Arts in English Literature. Kind of like us, except not in Scotland. We didn't go to Scotland. She is a Morris Award 2022 finalist, the winner of the Books Are My Bag 2021 Readers Award for Young Adult Fiction, and the winner of the 53rd NAACP Image Awards in the Outstanding Literary Works for Youth and Teens. All the awards. Love to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Àbíké-Íyímídé established and runs a mentorship scheme for unagented writers of color, helping them on their journey to get published. She's also written for NME, The Bookseller, Reader's Digest, and Geldem. So that's a bio on her website. You could read it yourself, but I read it to you, so now you know a little bit more. Other cool things is that, like I mentioned, this book came out in 2021, and she was given a 7-figure book deal for her next book.
Yes!
From U.S. publishers. And it's like, we love to see it.
Yeah.
There's like all these articles like 21-year-old author gets 7-figure book deal. I'm like, she's gonna write some good stuff. Her next book, Where Sleeping Girls Lie, is the next one to come out. It's about an elite boarding school in England, has a Black Muslim main character, unfriendly Black and Asian hottie solving crime, sapphic tension, and a stolen guinea pig named Muffin. This is all from Faridah's Twitter. She also tweets a lot about Love Island, so if you're into that, go follow her. Yep, that's all I have on our author today.
Cool. Okay, so what the heck is this book about? I mean, I feel like Gossip Girl meets Get Out really tells you everything you need to know about the plot devices and what's gonna happen, but I will describe it to you anyway. So, Chimaka, the it girl, she's head prefect, she wears fancy shoes, she's on top of the world. She's bent on climbing the social ladder all the way to Yale medical school success. She uses people to get to the top. And Devon, a talented musician, he's a scholarship kid who's really, his main goal is just to slip through high school and on into Juilliard unnoticed. He doesn't want anyone to know his name. But these two are the only 2 Black students at their very old and very prestigious high school, Nevaeh. But for some reason, well, for fairly obvious reasons, when you meet them, they never really talk to each other. They're from very different worlds. They have very different strategies. They're very different people. The first week of their senior year, a series of increasingly insidious texts are sent to the whole school, revealing Devon and Chimaka's dark secrets, along with some intrusive pictures, from an anonymous texter called Aces. These texts start throwing the pair into the spotlight and putting their personal lives and their academic futures at risk. It's kind of ruining everything, as it would. And it becomes more and more clear that the texts are racially motivated because the only 2 Black students at the school are the only 2 people really, truly targeted. And they get more, obviously, racialized. This unravels everything they thought they knew about their school to reveal a whole secret society upon which the school was founded that practices social eugenics.
It's the idea that there are superior races and to kind of weed out anyone who's not white. I think to clarify as well, not only the only Black students, but they're the only students of color as well.
So the 2 of them have to work together and become a somewhat reluctant team, and Chimaka and Devon's list of people who they can trust grows thinner and thinner and thinner till they feel kind of hopeless. But with the help of the largely African-American public, which has been mobilized on Twitter, they are able to literally burn down the institution. The school burns down. And they share their story with a Black journalist, and they sort of are able to start on a new path towards the future. So it's not going to be the future that they thought, but they do have a future and they feel like they can start planning for it again.
They weren't intending to burn down the school.
That wasn't the plan.
It just also happened, but it's quite dramatic. It's a great ending.
Yeah, nothing goes to plan in the last 20 pages.
I mean, from Chi's perspective, the entire book is her life not going to plan.
That's true. That's true. Chi, every step of the way is oh, what's that? It's the Sharpay line from High School Musical. She's like, this is not what I want. This is not what I planned.
Exactly. Faridah on her website has like a list of like 20 things to know about her. Apparently, she is self-proclaimed the biggest High School Musical fan of all time. So she may really had some Sharpay vibes as she was writing.
She might have. Oh, that's so funny.
For our discussion today, welcome back to your English class from grade school. We're going to be talking about the elements of fiction.
Yay!
Not as much to like dig into like the craft of fiction or to give you any boring definitions of what a protagonist is, but these are just jumping off points because Julie and I had lots of things to say.
Yeah.
And the only way we could think to organize it was with just elements of fiction. So
Yeah.
here we go.
Here we go. We are now instead of your book club leaders, we are now your freshman year of high school English teachers.
We'll start with like some of the easiest ones. Let's talk about our protagonists, the main characters, the two people we're spending the most time with.
And the people from whose perspective we're told the story, right? Because it alternates between the perspectives and it's told in first person present, which I would point out I normally hate. So.
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that.
Yeah, I was reluctant at first, but they won me over.
Yeah, it's really the best, I think it's one of the best ways to write a thriller because you're just really in the moment with them. And if you're in past tense, you know they survive. If it's in present tense, the protagonist can die, which is really difficult to do. But we have two protagonists, so theoretically the book could have carried on. But thankfully, neither of them died. Both of them survive. They are each playing, though, a game of survival. And when we open the beginning of the book, from Chi's point of view, her strategy is to play the game to be noticed, to win, to get to the top. And Devon is playing to not be noticed in the social politics of their school. He's flying under the radar. And when he gets named prefect at the beginning of their senior year, he's like so flabbergasted. He doesn't understand why. And everyone is like, that's weird. We don't even really know who you are. Whereas when Chi was named head prefect, it made sense. She'd been prefect like every year for her class. That was like her way of coming in and try to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
When we were talking about this, prepping for the episode, something that I was kind of putting words to and remembering was maybe one reason that not only is it their personalities and the way that the author's creating these characters, why they're playing these different ways, but there also might be some other social and racial dynamics going on, even from the get-go. So Devon, as a Black American who is, his family is kind of written as a little more poor. His mom is working really hard, multiple jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Occasionally when money is tight, Devon is kind of entangled a bit with some of the drug trafficking in their neighborhood so he can make some money here and there in a pinch. And it's kind of written in a way that Devon might have more context of like how America works and the implications racially for him, and definitely feels like an outsider in the school from the beginning because of his lower socioeconomic status. Him and his friend Jack is white, but they're from the same neighborhood, and they're the two scholarship kids, and they would study together, and they worked really hard to get into this school. On the other hand, she has a lot of privilege. She is the daughter of two immigrants. Her father is Italian and her mother is Nigerian, and both of them are doctors and wealthy, highly educated. She is an only child. She has basically everything she could ask for, except time and attention from her parents.
Yeah.
We often see that she is home alone. When she does get time with her parents, she doesn't always feel very understood and doesn't always seem to trust them with like the hard things that are going on in her life. She doesn't really open up about it. But that's also a typical trope in young adult fiction, is that the protagonists are pretty much on their own and the adults in their lives aren't necessarily that helpful or that around in stories like these. Here's one example of where we see kind of like the way their upbringing has impacted them. Devon and Chi are driving in a car. Chi doesn't like driving after an accident, which is a main plot point. And so Devon is behind the wheel, but he doesn't have his driver's license. And they get pulled over. Thankfully, they have a moment where they can switch seats very quickly. And she is able to be in the driver's seat and show her registration and her driver's license. And Devon, his mode is what his mom has taught him, like, don't move, don't say much, just sit there, like, don't be a threat. Like, this is a really scary situation for him. Mm-hmm. Whereas she doesn't seem to have that kind of fear in the moment and is, like, talking with the cop and very, like, cordial and, like, almost a bit demanding even of, like, I think she even says something like, you don't need to see his driver's license, like he's not driving the car.
Yeah, she talks back to him.
And like talks about like their rights, where Devon is like, oh my gosh, like don't do that.
Yeah.
Thankfully, in that incident, they're able to leave without it becoming anything more. So that's just like one example of how we see them kind of interact differently in society because of maybe their context racially, but also their economic status. The twist, of course, in this book is that the game is rigged for neither of them to succeed. How they're playing the game doesn't really work out for either of them. There's so much the story is then about Black solidarity along color, class, and gender and sexuality, having to like come together, to work together, to share information in order to, fight back against this racist plot against them.
So much of the story, it takes them a long time to trust each other. Like, they're just such different people from such different backgrounds and experiences and very different perceptions of the world, but they're both very guarded in very different ways. And so there are so many times when you're like, oh my God, just talk to each other,
Yeah.
And they just don't. They don't share things that could be helpful, or the most important things, I think, are things that might provide context. So, like, sometimes Chi will just be, like, laying into Devon, like, him being lazy or, like, not thinking or not being on time. And his dad, he just found out his dad died. And I'm like, that's some context that would be very helpful for her to have. Not that he has to tell her, so it's obviously very personal. But there's a, like his sort of strategy is like, don't make excuses, don't tell anyone, don't make waves, don't draw attention to yourself, like, sort of keep everything bottled up. And for her, it's like, you have to be powerful, you have to always know what you're doing, you can't make mistakes, like that kind of thing. And so it just clashes. One of the things that really boggled me, like every step of the way, Chiamaka continues to trust adults. And this was a big difference between the two of them.
Yeah, namely the white adults.
The white adults. Like, and she keeps telling adults what's happening. So the two most notable ones are she tells their headmaster, who, like, from the get-go, you're like, oh, this dude is very creepy. He does not have their best interests at heart. Like, gross. Don't tell him anything. Why would you tell him things? And that backfires very badly. And then much later on in the novel, she's had her heart broken so many times. And so, like, she's uncovered so many horrible things and so much has happened to her. But she still goes to this white journalist and trusts her with the story and goes with the journalist's plan and sort of gives control to this white journalist to help them uncover this secret society that's happening at their school. And that backfires big time because she's like in on it. Like every step of the way, I'm like, I was sort of confused why that almost never changed. It seemed like she continued to trust the system in the way that from the beginning Devon did not really. And as Victoria mentioned, I think it's partly cultural background differences, context, but also it kind of feels like they're in two different genres. Like in their minds, they're in two different genres. So like Chi thinks that she's in Gossip Girl. You know what I mean? Like it's super cutthroat and you can't really trust anyone with your real feelings, but the system ultimately, it's messed up. It's a very messed up system, but it ultimately will always operate the same way that will allow her to climb through the ranks and sort of quote unquote win the social game. There aren't any different rules for her. Whereas for Devon, it seems like from the beginning, he kind of knows that he's in Get Out because his goal is to not be noticed. He's like, don't draw attention to yourself. Just slip through the cracks so maybe the monsters won't notice you, kind of. He's trying not to draw attention. Like, he still has some trust in his music teacher that gets crushed so painfully.
I think I read it more as not causing any problems so that he can continue to be a scholarship kid, to get into Juilliard, to not be bullied, and to kind of keep under wraps his sexuality because he has dated like one of the other students. And that's one of the first things that comes out and in these text messages from Aces. And also I think when they're just starting to like get these text messages, they tend to be about Devon and Chi with other people. And so it almost seems like, oh, we're all being like having our dirty secrets exposed. But we kind of like come to learn later that the other people who are being targeted are actually kind of like in on it. They are in on it. So it's not like they're truly losing as much by being like on display.
Yeah, they assume, that's true, that he assumes it's more kind of run-of-the-mill cyberbullying from other students. The first things that are revealed are about who people the two of them have dated or tried to date or whatever. It's like romantically related. But yeah, Devon gets outed. He's more scared that his mom's gonna find out. So, and he's been bullied for that at the public school, like in his neighborhood. In middle school, it was like very, very bad. So that's a good point, that maybe him trying to fly under the radar isn't necessarily racially motivated as much as that's part of it, but it's more experiences related to his sexuality. But it's a different, very different attitude, I guess. And it felt like their mindsets were just so different from each other. So that made us think of like, you know, we've had this conversation before about using horror. We've had this conversation multiple times on several episodes about like using horror to talk about racism.
Yeah, so we can talk about genre a little bit. So the genre of this book, you know, we mentioned like dark academia. So like, I don't know, how would you define that, Julia? It's in a school setting and there's some dark things happening.
It's usually a university or some kind of private school. There's usually some kind of murder, death, dark things happen, but it's a certain tone more than anything. Like it's very much like a subgenre of like thriller.
Yeah, so dark academia, thriller, horror, elements of all of this. And we've talked about in our episodes about Beloved by Toni Morrison and Friday Black by Nana Kwame Adjei-Brené. Some of the short stories in that collection, well, most of the short stories in that collection, all use elements of horror to talk about racism. And in this book, in Ace of Spades, you know, we get a slightly more dramatized version of the experience of being in a racist system where, like, every time you feel like you're safe or that someone's going to help you, you find out they're part of it too, they're part of the system, and it feels like there's no way out. And they would say, like, only slightly dramatized, like, it's like so close to reality in many ways. In Friday Black, we have some very kind of larger than life scenarios and plots and maybe like alternative universe stories that kind of like highlight the horrors of racism a little differently. And Beloved has like the ghost factors, some supernatural elements. We don't really get those elements in Ace of Spades. Everything creepy and spooky that happens is like actual human beings being racist assholes.
Yeah.
And, you know, coming together to have this like plot to like let in 2 Black students to their school just to like tear them down. Yeah, so the plot of this book is like a teensy bit more dramatized for effect, but it's like basically reality for many Black people in America. We weren't really going to talk about setting, but I'm going to mention it here. The setting of this is at a private school in a nondescript city in a nondescript location of America. But I was reading some like interviews with the author, and she very intentionally wanted to place this in an unspecified place. So it's not about like, oh, those people in that area do these racist things, but like an acknowledgement that this happens in so many places in so many ways, that you could put this fictional boarding school in practically any location, and there's elements that ring true. There's some historical pieces that make it kind of, and like logistics of like Juilliard and Yale and whatnot that make it sense to place it in America, but there are elements of this private school that feel very like British.
Yeah, there's a specific mention that it was designed in the 1700s it was modeled after like British institutions. It specifically mentions that. And there are still a couple of boarding schools that are like that, and they're like all in like New England. They're all on the East Coast. So that was kind of in my mind where I was putting it, but
yeah, that, like I said, like the historical pieces when they reference like the history of the school, it's like, well, this is probably not in like Montana, which was like not a place where European settlers were building schools. But otherwise the setting is very purposefully ambiguous, so it's not about like those people in that state or that town. It's about all of us.
I found it very interesting that besides the reveal that she actually also likes girls, I felt like I could predict a lot more of her plot twists. Because most of her plot twists were like, you can't trust that white person. I felt like that was very... that I saw a lot of those coming. I was like, yeah, he's gonna be a bad person. I feel like I saw Jamie coming a mile away. The minute she said that he was a legacy, I was like, yeah, he's gonna be one of the main villains. I'm calling it now. Because he's so close to her. I was just like, girl, get out of that relationship. But with Devon's, a lot of his plot twists I did not see coming. And they were so incredibly devastating. Like, when you find out his dad died, that whole chapter of, like, seeing Dre in prison and they, like, put their hands on the glass and they have this emotional moment, and then he's already just, like, a mess. And then he goes and he asks about his dad and he finds out his dad died, like, 7 years ago and he never got to say goodbye. I had to put the book down. That was like,
it's heavy.
So, my God. And you like find out that he tried to drown himself. That was what the memory of the water was. Like, so many things. I was just like, oh my God. Whereas like, even with Chi, with the car accident hitting the girl, I like kind of figured it was some kind of setup. The fact that Jamie stopped talking about it and was like, what crash? What accident? What are you talking about? I was like, oh, this was a setup. He's manipulating her. He's trying to blame her for it. Either the girl's not dead, she got plastic surgery, something.
I feel like Jamie, I knew was bad news, but I didn't realize how bad of news he was.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I figured, I honestly, I think, if I'm trying to remember to what I originally thought of him, I thought he was going to be more like Belle as far as like, I want to be your friend and support you and this sucks, and not recognize his own complicity. But he's very, very aware of what he's doing and what he's a part of, and does not seem to have remorse. In this book, the element to me that's like, you know, like a bit dramatized beyond reality is kind of the allegorical part of it too. Like, you can kind of read quite closely like all the different types of forms of racism that the protagonists encounter in this book. It's all in one collected heap of people who are working together, but it is very like the part that feels like very true, that so much feels very true to reality. But what I'm trying to get at is there's so many types of racist white people in this book. Like,
yeah, she covers them all.
Yeah, and many who do it in multiple ways. Yeah, my notes say many of the spectrum of whites. What was I writing? So yeah, everything from like the blatantly verbally racist comments from like one guy in their chemistry class to the very condescending and gaslighting manipulation of Jamie, the characters who, and I see this in Jamie too, that kind of like fetishize the black students. So we have one of the peers in Devon's music class who seems to be like, he's like interested in Devon sexually, but like isn't going to admit it, and like it's like really weird. Like, he seems to just be like fetishizing him. And I think Jamie also is like angry at his own attraction to Chi. Like, that's the part that felt like he wasn't in control, is like that he actually did find something that he thought was attractive in her, and that made him angry because like that was his mission, was to get close to her to then bring her down. But he then takes out his anger at his own attraction through violence, and we see that at the end, well, throughout, but also at the end. So yeah, maybe we can go through some of these other secondary characters. So we have like Mr. Ward, who's the headmaster that gets brought in for this specific year for their terrible, disgusting plot. Yeah, he's the mix of condescending and gaslighting and abusing his power. Pure evil vibes from him from the beginning. We're like, that's not good. That's not good. But I was a little duped by some of the other characters. I mean, obviously, you get to a point where you're like, oh, all of them are in on this. So, like, all of them are the worst. But the music teacher, especially, that one really was hard to read because he seemed like the one person that was rooting for Devon to do well. And turns out he's been, like, gaslighting Devon the whole time and doesn't think he's actually good enough to get into Juilliard. And, like, doesn't think he deserves it. Is actually like actively sabotaging his chances. That was like, terrible. And the reporter, I mean, that's on me to be duped that easily, but I was weirded out when I was trying to like read between the lines to figure out if she was white or not. And I thought maybe she's like outside of it and she was going to be somewhat helpful. But then she was like totally in on it.
I started suspecting her. I mean, I felt like it was a bad idea the minute she recommended it, because I was like, in order for this school to operate the way it does, they have to have some white journalists on their side. They have to have the cops on their side, you know. So I was like, this does not seem like a good idea. Like, you should go to the news outside of your town, where they don't have influence, you know, or less influence. So I felt nervous the minute she recommended it. But I was like, okay, maybe it would work. I don't know. But then the minute that because they didn't bring her very much, and she was immediately like, oh, we're going to bring in a whole film crew to like film you. It didn't seem real. The minute she took charge and was like, oh, we don't just want to print this. We want to like do like a live on TV, this whole thing. And I was like, I don't feel like a good journalist would do that.
Yeah.
I feel like she would have follow-up questions and would do some investigation. And, you know, if she were taking it seriously, that was when I was like, oh yeah, this is not gonna work. But yeah, it's very similar like to the music teacher, I think, where plays the role very well of being a very well-meaning, supportive, and probably to other people is genuinely well-meaning and supportive. And then there's Belle.
Yeah.
Oh, Belle. Belle is more complicated. So, silly me. When she started getting, like, the butterflies, like, looking at Belle's face, or, like, started feeling her attraction, I thought that that was her subconscious recognizing Belle from the accident. And so
oh, really?
Belle, yeah, I didn't read anything sexual into it until it got very obvious. So I thought that she was gonna be, because it kept emphasizing the blonde curls in both of them, and so I thought that this was like the girl that they had hit, and she survived, and she got plastic surgery, and she's coming back to take revenge or something. That was like what I had concocted. It was like very ridiculous. So then they get together, and you're like, I don't want to trust her, but she seems to like genuinely care and seems to have separated herself somewhat from the things that are happening, and like really does seem to want to emotionally support Chiamaka. But then when we find out it's Belle's sister, her older sister, Belle's whole family is in on it, and she went to this camp, she was indoctrinated, and she clearly doesn't know anything about Black people. And you watch her as they begin this relationship, like, be really genuinely in like with her and like learn things and have questions and be like really start to have her mind opened. But she just sits on the fence, you know? She doesn't actually do anything at the end of the day that's actually helpful. So they have this really sort of, Chiamaka shows up and is just super angry and demands answers. And all Belle does is just like cry her white girl tears and, you know, try and just apologize. But before she cries, after she cries, she doesn't do anything. She becomes complicit. You know, her character, because she was more complicated, and also Jack's character, who was also more complicated, it felt like those two were highlighted more because they're a bit more like people that you encounter in your life.
These might be sort of like self-inserts for white readers.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of like trying to find yourself in the cast of characters. And I think it's really important that there are no white people who are not complicit. And Belle couldn't, you know, cry her white girl tears and then like come save the day. Like, no. Belle is just saying like, I'm sorry, but then doesn't really do much to help Chi out. And she rightfully doesn't trust her anymore, then she shouldn't. But it is painful for both of them because I think Belle, she's very indoctrinated into everything, but then she's one of the examples of someone who like actually gets to know someone to get to know a Black person and be like, oh, like, wait, maybe I don't believe all those things. But Belle isn't at a point where she's actively dismantling the system. Yeah. And Jax similarly is in the position and the example of a character who is from a lower socioeconomic status and is kind of pitted against Devon is kind of like, you or him, like only one of you can make it. And Jack's defense continues to be like, I'm just looking out for myself. I'm looking out for my brothers. I barely got in. I barely got the invite into the club. So I just need to do what I can do to not jeopardize my position, because the powerful, wealthier white people are saying, like, it can't be both of you. It's either the poor white kid or the poor black kid, but not both. And it was never going to be the poor black kid anyways. So one small critique is I wish we would have gotten more of Jack and Devon as friends before we get all the ways their relationship is falling apart. It's sprinkled in there because we get some like backstory and some like references to how they used to interact with each other. I just wish we kind of saw more of that. But I don't know, maybe it just been even that much more painful to read.
That's a good point. And it's so painful to watch when Devon like beats the shit out of him and Jack just kind of lies there and lets him do it.
And they're both like crying.
They're both sobbing. Oh my god.
A lot of these secondary characters we talked about, these are all the, you know, the white characters and their relationship with their protagonist. But let's also talk about the other relationships in this book, Devon and his community. So first we have Dre, who is his like first love. But honestly, I thought we were going to get more of Dre, and it's like really heartbreaking. And he's also kind of a bit of a foil, because I think he's got a similar personality as Devon. But the way, you know, Devon kind of tells the story of Dre is that Dre didn't have the opportunities to go somewhere else, to leave. And so he did what he had to do to survive, which is kind of become a leading drug dealer in the neighborhood. And they have, you know, their clandestine affair. Devon comes over and everyone knows, but no one really says.
Well, also, he's a very important foil because he was kicked out by his parents for being gay. And so that is sort of a looming threat as well for Devon. He feels like he can't tell anyone that he's not safe in his home or in his neighborhood, so they have to keep it quiet. That relationship is so compelling because they were friends for so long. And then they fell in love, and we see them be happy together. And then we see it get torn apart by the world at large, but also by this particular plot from Nevaeh's.
There is a new chapter being, I think it was recently released as like the 1 year anniversary of the book being released. And it has a new chapter where Terrell, who we haven't talked about yet, Devon and Chi go to like a pride festival together, pride parade. And we get like a little, I haven't read it yet, but I hear there's like a little something about like what happened to Belle and what happened to Dre. And I'm like, I want to know.
Yeah.
Because yeah, the last we see is he's in prison.
That relationship was so well done, so beautiful, so tough to read. Because they're not broken up because they don't work together. They're broken up because of the world. So the whole time you're just sort of rooting, hoping that they could, or that, you know, that there's some magic solution that could make their circumstances different. And if they had just had more support, if things had just been slightly different, what could have happened? So that one was really hard for me. I'm a sucker for the tragic angst. I really am.
And part of the angst, as we've highlighted, is that Devon is not out with his mom.
Yeah. Or he thinks he's not.
He thinks he's not. And he's very concerned about how she's going to react. She has not communicated to him in a way that he's understood, that she like would accept him. Like he understands her religious views and social norms and just thinks it's not going to be good because of how he's seen her react about other people being queer. It's great that Devon's mom is ultimately accepting, but like, oof, like you could have been more direct. Like, kids, remember things you say. Like, even though she seems to have changed her mind because she finds out that Devon gets beat up at school because he was kissing a boy, but he has like trauma blocked that memory and doesn't remember.
Well, he had some brain damage immediately after. So that probably
brain damage and just blocking it out and whatnot. And so she decides that she's just going to wait until he's ready to tell her. But like, maybe be a little more explicit that you support LGBTQ plus people.
Right, because he has receipts. He has other examples of how she responds to, like, there was a girl who came out in their neighborhood. It was something on TV. Like, he has examples that he runs through in his mind of like, oh, this is how she would react. This is how she feels. And like, he just keeps it as a catalog to, like, remind himself, oh, I'm not safe. I can't tell her.
And, like, maybe she thought, because she would say things like, whoever you want to date, like, I think maybe she intended, like, oh, that's very open-ended, like, trying to be encouraging. Like, I'm, like, trying to communicate her support, including statements like, whoever you want to date. I think maybe she was hoping that would be enough for him to understand, like, she would support him, whatever gender of person you want to date. But, like, that was not truly communicated to him. And lastly, let's talk about Terrell.
Yeah! Dimples!
So Terrell feels like this character that just appears.
Yeah.
Remember, we're getting this from Devon's point of view. So he has forgotten that he used to know Terrell because of his former brain injury and, like, trauma situation. And Terrell was that boy that he had kissed. And so Terrell comes in knowing, like, way too much about Devon, and we're all like, what the heck? So it's kind of a weird way to introduce him, but overall, like, he's pretty great, and he is super supportive. He's the one that kind of points out, like, this sounds like a racist thing against you too. Like, you're the only two black kids and this stuff is happening to you. Like, supporting Devon and helping Chi, and, like, just generally there for them through the whole experience, which we can't say that about, like, literally anyone else in this novel. Terrell's, like, the only one who's, like, truly a good friend and is, like, there for them.
But it turns out he sort of knew what was happening because he had been approached by people from the school to ask to have him gather intel on Devon. And he says yes at first because they offer to help pay for his sister's medical bills. Even though very quickly he realizes what's happening and he's like, oh, this is very bad, and tries to give Devon as many clues as possible to help him figure it out, and is, like, consistently there trying to make up for his mistake. And he does come clean. So he does all the things that Belle doesn't, He actively helps. He shows up. He tells the truth by the end. But it's still a little frustrating, a little disappointing, and not completely resolved.
Yeah, it seems like very quickly Devon, like, gets the information that Terrell had been approached by someone from Nevaeh, and Devon seems to forgive him fairly quickly.
And then they just end up together.
I'm happy they end up together. And the epilogue was great. And maybe they went through therapy for years and they sorted through their relationship differences and their origins and the different, things that have happened. But we don't get that.
No. Part of the reason Terrell's reveal gets brushed over is he shows up to the school on the night that everything sort of goes down and tells Devon this right before he's about to go inside and try and confront all these people. It's, like, not great timing. And so we get this reveal, and Devon does not have time to process and just has to keep chugging forward. And there's so many moments that are, like, really great and also really fast. One of my favorite moments in the whole book is Chi stepping on Jamie's balls in her Jimmy Choos. It's one of the few moments where you're just like, yes, like, things actually work out the way that you want to. And she gets some sort of power back, and she has this monologue, and she's like, I am powerful, and she stomps on him in her heels, and it's amazing. And then everything goes to shit.
Yeah, so in this ending bit, Chi and Devon are going to, like, this big winter ball, and they're using this as, like, their big reveal to the news outlet. When they get up to speak, it's when, it all comes crashing down and they realize, like, the reporters aren't there to help them and their story isn't actually getting out. But the big resolution is that Devon has tweeted out what has happened to them, and it gained enough traction that a crowd of protesters arrive at the school at the same time and are able to, like, stand up for Chi and Devon, and then the building burns down.
Yeah.
The whole school goes up in flames. We don't really know how. It doesn't seem to be known yet when they watch, like, the news footage later. And I was, like, on edge the whole time because I did not think that the protesters were done. Like, I thought that there was going to be more to that storyline. I thought maybe there was going to be backlash about them. I thought maybe they were going to be blamed for the school burning down and, painted as, like, violent, angry Black people, like, burning down this prestigious school that did no wrong. Like, I thought Nevaeh was going to use it as, like, a shield. But instead it feels like Nevaeh just kind of hushes up the whole thing and they just like lurk back into the shadows, and there isn't really explanation about why were there protesters there. I mean, there's a note that the protesters all get away before like the cops show up so no one gets arrested. But like there's a lot of very powerful people who are witnesses there.
Yeah.
And theoretically a film crew that like had equipment. So yeah, that part of the resolution moved way too fast for me. I was like, wait a second. These protesters just come in, and it's this really great moment about like, you know, standing up against systemic racism is like a community effort. It's a really big and powerful system for like any one person to fight or two people to fight on their own. But yeah, the ending moved kind of quickly, and I was just like, is there going to be something else? Like, what happened to these protesters? Are they okay?
I was also really nervous about that, because I was like, yes, Nevaeh is incentivized to, you know, cover up what happened, but protesters make a very easy shield, you know, even if there's no hard evidence. It's just word of mouth, and like they have so much systemic support outside of the school. It's not like the school is an isolated thing. Like, we already have established that there are reporters in on it, and presumably the cops as well. They've had to cover up murders in the past. They could very easily, it seems, spin this, turn it on the protesters, and based on what we've seen in America, never have to address, well, why were the people protesting? So I totally agreed and felt like it was a little too easy. The institution isn't the school, it's the people, you know? So if all the people survived, then they can continue telling whatever story they want. But I suppose it was, if there were no people there, and maybe one of the, white students started the fire, maybe there was enough something or other that they felt the best move was just to kind of lick their wounds. And it was almost like they were like an army of ghosts, these protesters. They showed up, caused a ruckus, they were climbing on tables, and then they just disappear into the night. Like, who were these people? We don't know.
Ultimately, I did like how the book ended. The book kind of ends with Devon and Chi being like, we can dream again. Like, we can think about the future. And it didn't seem to like, button everything up or move. I mean, I think the very ending moved at a very nice pace. And then I liked the epilogue as well. So kind of fast forward, Chi does become a doctor. And Devon is like a music professor, and he's with Terrell. His mom isn't working 2 jobs anymore. She gets to like have time for herself. And we learned that she and Devon have kind of committed themselves to creating educational opportunities for particularly students of color to have those like high achieving academic spaces, but then also to be kind of like watchdogs when schools like Nevaeh, that they reach out to the family of those students to like kind of tell them like, hey, this is what you should know before you attend this school. Here's other options you can consider. And so it's kind of interesting that they kind of have their side project to make sure students like themselves don't have to go through that. And then we get this really cinematic moment, which I love. She goes into the clinic where she works, and the patient sitting there is Headmaster Ward.
And he doesn't look so good. Yeah, I liked that the conclusion was sort of like, it's not like everything's fixed, but they have the tools they need, and they find they have the opportunity again to keep moving forward, and they reach out to the Black journalist to, tell their story, and there's this sense of like slowly taking up more and more space, and slow systemic change is more what you get rather than like an kind of instant relief.
So for people who enjoyed reading this book, what would you recommend that they listen to, watch, read next?
As I already mentioned Veronica Mars, Get Out, and Not Me. Another TV show that's also in this sort of dark academia genre out of Spain is called Elite. It's Gossip Girl, but with murder. Set in Spain, so they're very Spanish about the whole thing. And then also another reference that I forgot while we were talking is Moonlight. Dre's character reminded me a lot of that, of Chiron. So those 5 things.
Faridah has a Spotify playlist that she created for Ace of Spades. It's a delight. I started listening to her earlier today.
Cute.
And it reminded me of Julia's playlist that she made for Red, White, and Royal Blue. I'm like, oh, I love a good playlist that just like gives you like the vibe of a book. Moves to a lot of the emotional beats. I've been reading more short stories lately. There was one that was published in Friction issue number 17. I believe, called Aparna by Sachin Waikar. Kind of like the high school mystery elements is what kind of resonated with me there. There's like this mysterious girl that kind of disappears, and it's her story told by the people in her community. Another one I just read recently in Friction number 16 is called Jurassic Park by John Manuel Arias. It is the story of Jurassic Park, but if someone who worked on the cleaning staff was telling it. It's like kind of ridiculous, but also like super scary and like intense. And then Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia is also great. And last but not least, Currently Obsessed. These are the things we are thinking about enjoying this time in our lives that may have nothing to do with what we talked about today.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, I told you the long and winding tale of how I finally saw Everything Everywhere All at Once, and it was incredible. Go see that film. I think it's on Prime now. There's a new album from Conan Gray called Super Ache, and it's probably his best album yet, and it's just sad boy hours all the way through, and I've been really feeling it this weekend. And then I also watched Umbrella Academy Season 3. It was so good, friends! It was very character-driven, and I'm a very character-oriented person, especially with this show. I love all the characters. The plot is bananas, and they're so bad at time travel. Like, you can't think about the logic of the plot at all, especially as it relates to previous seasons. But if you throw that out the window and just enjoy the characters, it is a blast.
Okay, so last week I read Get a Life, Chloe Brown by Talia Hibbert, which is the first book in the Brown Sisters trilogy. We talked about the second here on the podcast last fall, I believe. And it was a delight. I love it so much. Talia Hibbert's amazing. I was like dealing with some back pain at the time, and so like it was like my joy to get through like not great week physically, and so I would just go like escape into a different world for a little bit. It was great. I recently traveled to Minnesota and Wisconsin, and while I was in Minneapolis, I went and saw Emma at the Guthrie Theater, adaptation from Jane Austen, Emma. The playwright is Kate Hamill, and it was fantastic. And Kate Hamill has adapted Sense and Sensibility and Pride and Prejudice for the stage. I think it's her life's mission to adapt all Jane Austen to the stage. And if you're in Minnesota or near the Twin Cities, go and see it. But also Kate Hamill won awards. She was like one of the most staged playwrights in America, like contemporary playwrights.
Whoa.
In like 2018, 2019, like pre-pandemic times. Because her plays are a hit and people like want to stage them. So hopefully Emma will get picked up and staged a bunch of other places and you can see it when it comes to a city near you. And I got new tennis shoes, Fleet Feet, which is all across America and perhaps in other countries too. So now this recommendation might actually work for people who aren't locationally based near me. Fleet Feet. I've never been there before, but they're like a running shoe store, and I'm not much of a runner. I run some, but not like a ton, so I never thought it was like necessary. But they have like these super cool like feet scanners. They like scan your feet in like 3D imaging, and you like walk across this sensor on the floor, and they measure like how you walk, and then they recommend shoes based off of your like foot needs, and they do like whole assessment. It was like 20 minutes like sitting chatting with a sales associate, and he's going through all my like figures and stats and explaining how like feet work and like how it impacts your body.
Wow.
And so then he like narrowed it down to like 3 options for me. I tried them all on. They were all great. Went with one of them, and like it was just like the easiest shoe shopping experience, and I don't have easy feet to shop for.
Yeah.
So I am now a Fleet Feet stan.
That sounds really fun. I'd love to learn about my feet.
Yeah. But I feel like I'm walking on clouds. It's delightful.
Wow. Oh, I'm so glad. All right, well, I think we need to stop.
Yeah, that was a lot about shoes. We could probably cut most of that.
That's a lot about shoes.
Thank you for listening to Book Club with Julia and Victoria. We would love to hear your thoughts on this book or the topic we discussed, so you can share your review and recommendations with us on Instagram at BookClubWithJV, on our website, bookclubwithjv.com, or by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. You can also visit our website for show notes with links to all of the recommendations and the things bringing us joy. If you don't already, go ahead and follow us on whichever podcast platform you are listening on so that you can be notified when our next episode is released. This episode was co-hosted and produced by myself, Victoria Bruick, along with Julia Clausen. Rebecca Gasme provides us with project management support, our music is composed by Greg Bruick, and our logo was designed by Gabby Febland. Until next time, happy reading.